Good afternoon, everybody. I think that all the attendees have now joined. And welcome to this afternoon's Bar Human Rights Committee Roundtable in celebration of International Women's Day and, of course, Women's History Month. And I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by three of my favourite people today, who are all equally and individually inspirational. Fellow members of the Bar Human Rights Committee Executive, we're joined by Vice Chair Gronya, Treasurer Jodie, and Exec Member Haydee. And today's roundtable is really to explore this year's theme of accelerating action. And as part of that, we'll hopefully be discussing some of the work that the Bar Human Rights Committee does in the area, but also some personal experiences from each of our speakers. It is intended to be a discursive and informal and relaxed roundtable, so please do feel free to pop any questions into the chat. We very much welcome those. Frankly, they're often the most interesting parts of any discussion. And I'm sure that everybody here and joining today has something valuable to add to the conversation. So this year's theme, as I said already, is accelerating action. And that's really what today's roundtable is about. And what does that mean to human rights defenders and in particular women worldwide? And what we hope to do is examine the role of the women as catalysts for change and spotlight the urgent need to enhance protections for women who are performing these vital roles globally. We're very fortunate ultimately in the UK, but what we see all across the world around us are attacks taking place, including in what are supposed to be very advanced and civilized democracies and our neighbours. What I want to do first of all is just have is to open up the floor and to first of all have a little think about from our speakers' perspectives, those individuals who have inspired us in our work, drive us to do things better, drive us forward and assist us in trying to make things and trying to achieve more in that whole field. The first question I'm going to ask actually is really. So I don't know who wants to go first, but speak about somebody or a group of individuals that have inspired you in your work and your advocacy. Perhaps I can turn first of all to Haydee.
Very much, Jo, and thanks everyone for attending today and your interest in this discussion. Well, when I was thinking about, a female human rights defender that inspires my work, I actually settled on a category of women that I've come across through some of my work. In particular, I've done some work recently with supporting individuals who are detained abroad. Often arbitrary detention or hostage taking. It can be British nationals or individuals from other countries. But what I found was that often it's the family members who are left at home who are left in a situation where they have to step up and suddenly become human rights defenders themselves. So these are often wives or mothers or daughters of the individual who is detained abroad. And, sometimes as well, the individual detained abroad, of course, can be a woman as well. But it's those individuals who never expected to be thrust into a role of becoming a human rights defender, but gladly do so on behalf of those people that they love, and often have to put their lives completely on hold and jump into becoming an advocate when they don't have any kind of training, and the bravery that comes with that as well. I think that that's very much inspired me with the work that I do. And then often to see when, there's a good resolution to the case and the person is returned home, that these women, and other family members often are also continuing their advocacy work as well, that it's something that fundamentally changes their outlook on life and how they form networks and then support other people as well. And I do find that quite inspiring.
We've certainly seen that more broadly across the work of the Bar Human Rights Committee, including in Colombia and the Caravana and all of those sorts of situations where, as you say, women are ultimately thrust into these positions, willing or otherwise, and take on these roles and do ultimately push and force change in often what are frankly horrific and very difficult situations. It's often not a choice at all for many of the women that we work with and we work alongside and we try to support. It's quite a different situation when you're sat in your office in London, compared to the scenarios that an awful lot of women around the world are facing daily, whether it's basics such as insecurity, basic insecurities owing to different challenges, or whether it's acute situations that then arise and are thrust upon them. Jodie, I know you've also been doing quite a lot of work in this area as well. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to bring in at this point.
Well, I think it's a really good category to choose, Haydee, actually, because it's yeah, often the victims and survivors who become the greatest advocates in their own cases. And it is, thinking in my domestic work where I and in Trinidad where I practice as well, victims of sexual crime often perpetrated by state actors. So I have quite a few actions against the police where the woman has been raped or sexually assaulted by an officer and in prison as well. We can call these women human rights defenders because they are standing up against the state in a way which has to require so much bravery to be believed. Not only is being believed against an aggressor, so difficult when you've been traumatized, but when it's against the state and it's the authority of the state that comes together rather than just the individual perpetrator, that's incredibly difficult to challenge. And their ability, I'm always kind of just so inspired by, to come forward and articulate what's happened to them. And then, as we know, the court backlogs in this jurisdiction are immense, but the same in other jurisdictions around the world where, having made those disclosures, they have to wait so long to be in court raising those concerns and complaints, and often subjected to significant cross-examination. I mean, I'll come on to a project we did with BHRC about this in one of the other answers, but the process through which the justice system requires women who've been put through such traumatic situations to give their accounts is just so traumatic and re-traumatizing. So I think those women are equally inspiring as victims. And we've all got people we can name, I think, who stand out, but I'm sort of a bit reluctant to do that in terms of, particular brilliant women, because so many are. So I'm sort of going to resist doing that unless really forced to do it.
No, I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. I think the reality is that people are in these positions or across the world in all sorts of different positions, some who are very well known and some who are not known to hardly anybody else, but actually are fulfilling these roles on a daily basis in practically everything they do. And each and every single one of them, frankly, is inspirational, because it's a choice that you ultimately make, even if it's thrust upon you to do so. It's not something you have to do. I think you make a really good point, though, Jodie, in the sense that, of course, in terms of the work you're talking about in this country, at least those individuals have an investigation and get to that point. But of course, a lot of set against that, a lot of the individuals that we work with are also facing not only the original harm from the state, but also the state actively trying to prevent any form of redress whatsoever. And whether that's in terms of the full range of intimidation, violence, we've often seen that before, or whether it's putting formal legalistic mechanisms, as some would say exist in this country and other countries, in the way. So I think there are all those different layers ultimately add up and make it even more challenging, not least because, as we all, I suspect, I'll have some level of sympathy to the structural position of women in our society, both within the UK, but also globally, in the historical position of women within society, and all of those aspects that also have a role to play. I'm just going to touch very briefly, Grania, and come to you, if I may.
Yes, thanks, Joe. And hi, everybody. It's lovely to be here. I actually am a big fan of International Women's Day because I think it's important that we come together to reflect and to talk about these issues and to ultimately amplify women's voices and experiences. So thank you to all of you for joining us. I do have a person in mind, contrary to the trend, who is Mary Robinson, who was the first woman president of Ireland. She was the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, and she now does a lot of work, in particular around women and climate justice. And the reason why I've chosen her is she was a big figure for me growing up, and I'm really impressed by the range of her advocacy. So she was a barrister first, and she was involved in really important ECHR litigation, including the Airy case, which was around the provision of civil legal aid for domestic violence victims. Then she was in politics, obviously, and gave this really powerful speech when she was elected about women rocking the system instead of rocking the cradle. And she also then moved on to the UN and now does a lot of really powerful advocacy work around campaigning. And so just really for the range and impact of her work, as well as just a figure that I always had, was always around when I was growing up, she would be the person that I would cite. But I agree, so many clients and colleagues are also on that list, and it is really hard to choose one.
I think that's, though, one of the nice things about this panel today is it's quite unusual to have an all-women panel, frankly. And so I think we should just celebrate that fact, in short. But moving on then from those individuals that have inspired you, really going to your own individual experiences now and memorable experiences that you've had that you consider have assisted in driving meaningful human rights progress in. Jodie, should I come to you first this time?
Sure. I think I'd like to highlight a BHRC project which I was involved in 2019, where we went to India, New Delhi, for a week and did what was just a fantastic program of training for students from across the country there, who all came despite having really heavy study programs, to be involved in that project. And it was about advocacy training to deal with women and children who had been subjected to sexual violence and gender-based violence, and introducing them to how we can adapt our language, identify and recognise trauma and the impact that trauma has on the way women and children are able to give their evidence about their experience. What was brilliant about it was that it was a truly collaborative piece of work, which we did not only with the law school there, but with a fantastic NGO called I Pro Bono, which exists across the Southeast Asian area. And just brilliant local lawyers who all came and gave their time for free to talk about the domestic situation, procedure, and advocacy techniques. And we also had a visit to the local court, which had been adapted as a consequence of that horrific rape case where a woman was raped and then murdered on a bus in Delhi. It led to changes in the legislation, which people involved in the training with us had helped through a review by Justice Varma, Chief Justice Varma, to produce. And it led to this particular changes in court where they had got a vulnerable witness suite and they could give their evidence from that suite by video into court, similar to the special measures in our jurisdiction. But it was just fantastic to see how that was emerging there, and the discussions from that. So I take away from that, a group of students who were really inspired to take this into their practices, and the connections we made with lots of local lawyers and fantastic women there who were involved in the project.
Yeah, and embedding change can often take quite a considerable amount of time, as we know, effectively it being incremental over time. But I think it's a really good example of how BHRC was able to harness its own expertise, but then also using principles of co-production, work alongside those within the country to really try to tailor something that was actually helpful, as opposed to simply coming along and trying to impose some sort of UK concept of justice and how it should work in a different country with different cultural traditions and different legal traditions. It was a really successful project, actually, and I'm sure it will have a lasting impact, not least because, as you say, Jodie, it's the next generation. And they are the ones who are wanting to do this. They're wanting to engage with it. They're wanting to make things better in some way. As I say, it will take, obviously all of these things take time. The UK system is far from perfect. Far from perfect. That's probably an understatement, in short. But hopefully, again, as I say, it's probably a good example for those that want to become involved in BHRC work of the types of things where you can utilise your own skills and really try to bring something of value. So do please bear that in mind, and obviously get in contact if you want to become involved in anything like that. I'll move back to you now, Haydee. If there's anything you want to add on that one?
Sure, yes. I think I have in mind two different examples of the way that advocacy has been involved in the work that I've done with pushing forward human rights topics, and specifically ones that involved the rights of women. So not only as the subject matter of the project and the advocacy, but also incorporating women as human rights defenders as well. So the first one is a project that I'm currently working on right now. It's with an organization called ARDO. It's the Afghanistan Human Rights Democracy Organization, and specifically examining the situation of gender persecution in Afghanistan at the moment, which I think falls so squarely within the topic we're talking about right now, about protecting women, and as we witness the really horrific things that are happening to women in Afghanistan at the moment. So this particular project is looking at collecting evidence and information about the widespread oppression of women and girls in Afghanistan, and looking specifically at policies that have been implemented by the Taliban regarding dress code and their appearance, and how that's led to crimes committed against women and girls, and also has impacted some of their fundamental human rights, like the right to free expression, and also the right to self-determination as well, and then the trickle-down effect as well into the rights to education and the right to work as well. So not only examining the evidence and the information, but then also what legal avenues under international law are available to address these crimes and to create pressure for policy change in Afghanistan. Whether it be looking at international criminal law or looking at mechanisms under international human rights law as well. So that one's been really meaningful. The other were two human rights fact-finding missions that were organized by PBI UK, and which I had the pleasure of attending as a member of the delegation and attending as a BHRC Executive Committee member. So I was part of a delegation of about 8 international lawyers. It was 2 different missions, one to Guatemala and one to Nepal, looking at different things. In Guatemala, it did incorporate working with human rights defenders and looking at land evictions for indigenous communities there. And the other one in Nepal was working again with human rights defenders who really led these missions. You know, it was a partnership to support the local human rights defenders who know best what is needed in those countries and the issues, and working with them to look at access to justice in the transitional justice process that's ongoing in Nepal at the moment. So those were 2 really meaningful projects, and a very different way to approach advocacy as well and to support human rights. So looking at a fact-finding mission, going and meeting with different stakeholders, collecting evidence, and then writing a report afterwards that can be used to implement change, as opposed to more of kind of the litigation or legal submission side of things.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Ultimately, advocacy really does traverse such different broad areas and can bring about change in many different ways. A purely strictly legal approach is not always, certainly from our experience at the BHRC, the best one ultimately. One has to look at the policy and everything else surrounding it too, and often softer approaches are the way through. Jodie, you've already spoken about training and those sorts of issues and embedding cultural change in a very different way. I think it just demonstrates the very wide range of work that is undertaken by women across the world, whether it's in legal briefings or within the training sphere or elsewhere. Grania, I'm just going to turn to you just because I'm picking up on what's just been discussed really and talking about another group of inspirational women. Obviously, the Afghani women judges who demonstrate such tremendous bravery in the face of real persecution and serious, threats to their life is understating it, in short. And I know that you've been involved in that as well. So if I just, as I say, ask you to say a few words about that, I'm sure that was very inspirational.
And this wasn't BHRC work, but I have to say, for anyone who's been working on Afghan cases, in particular Afghan women, over the last few years, they are really inspiring women. And so there's a cohort of senior prosecutors and judges in Kabul who were obviously working at a very high level, either prosecuting or sentencing, often Taliban members prior to 2021, who since the takeover obviously have effectively had to go into hiding, and who were and those who are still there remain at a really high risk. And there were a number of cases involved in trying to get them to relocate and resettle in various countries, including the UK. And I have in mind one prosecutor who I acted for, and it was really legally hard, and took, I think in the end 3 judicial reviews, but eventually arrived safely with her family. And she was really so talented and so brave, and had survived in Kabul for as long as she could after the Taliban takeover. But they're a cohort who are really inspiring and very much on the front line. So when I think of women human rights defenders at the minute, they are probably top of who comes to mind. But I agree that the Bar Human Rights Committee has also done really brilliant work in terms of trying to accelerate action, which is obviously the phrase for this International Women's Day. And the two examples I had in mind were firstly our trial observation work. And one of the trials that come to mind, there were a number of trials of Egyptian human rights defenders in Cairo, and one of them was a woman called Aya Higazi, who ran a children's rights charity and was arrested and charged with you name it, child trafficking, all sorts of offences that bore no resemblance to the work that she did and for which there was no evidence. And we observed that trial for quite a number of it went on for many years, and we were at certainly a number of the hearings. And she was eventually released, and the charges were not proved, but she spent almost 3 years in pre-trial detention. And so what we did in the Bar Human Rights Committee was look at that systemic problem in the criminal justice system and prepare a report, so in addition to actually being there while the trial was ongoing, which can have a huge impact in protecting those on trial and in particular women human rights defenders, but also the follow-up report, I think, made quite a difference. So that's just an example of some of the types of advocacy as well, in addition to the points made by Haydee and Jodie.
No, and trial monitoring is actually one of the core activities for a very long time within the Bar Human Rights Committee, probably one of its most traditional activities. And as you say, what it does is it's useful in that it casts a spotlight and ensures that people know that people are watching. It's the allowing sunshine effectively into the courtroom analogy. So again, if people are interested, that is something that we do a lot of. It often involves, as Grania has said, women defenders, obviously also men, across the world. Cairo it being one area that we've done quite a significant amount of work, Turkey another, but we are very active in different jurisdictions in that regard. I suppose one of the themes that emerges really are the challenges that face women who are engaging in work in this type of, whether it's work or whether it's because it's just sadly part of their lives and everyday experience. I don't know, Haydee, if there's anything you wanted to add really in relation to what you consider those challenges or the most substantial challenges to be the central ones that women in these situations face.
Yeah, well, I think thinking about challenges, we can think about like human rights defenders who are in the context of the human rights violations that we're addressing, but also for us as members of the bar or other lawyers around the world who are trying to develop their careers in order to support human rights defenders and also victims as well. I think I was thinking a little bit about what some of those main challenges that even we face are as well. And it's certainly not a one size fits all, and it's different for everyone. So it's hard to summarize it concretely, but just I think there's always improvement to be made in creating opportunities for women and underrepresented groups to have the opportunity to develop their careers and their ability to advocate for human rights or get involved in the causes that they find to be quite important. But then I'd also say, in addition to creating opportunities, one of the challenges I think is supporting women throughout their careers as well, and making sure that for us as members of the bar, for women who are lawyers around the world, that that a career is sustainable and you can continue growing through it. Looking to ways that communication can be improved in order to listen to what women need in their careers, and also when they're looking to defend human rights as well, whether it's for us in the UK or anywhere else around the world. So listening, what communication can be improved as well, and then also the flexibility as well. I think these are some of the main things that I was thinking about as far as challenges, and really making sure that women are able to meet those milestones, meet the goals that they want to attain in their careers and their ability to support other women. So I think I'll pause there, but those are some of the main things that I was thinking about.
No, I think a lot of those are very close to home, probably for all of us, including everyone that's attended today's seminar. I mean, ultimately, what you really want is you want to see women lifting other women up. You want the women to be other women's greatest cheerleaders. And I think we're very fortunate at the Bar Human Rights Committee in that that's exactly how the Executive Committee feels. I appreciate it's not always like that in every work environment, but ultimately that is what we should be doing. That is what celebrating women is about. It's about building those alliances. It's about celebrating other women's success. Somebody else's success does not reflect on either way on yours. It's that sort of thing. I think it's really important though, because I mean, just taking the UK bar, there are systemic challenges for women at the bar. There are challenges in how you juggle your practice with your home life. Women still, as we know, undertake the vast majority ultimately of the care in the home. If women have families, they're often the ones with the mental load. Hopefully things are changing, and certainly we are seeing that. But notwithstanding that, ultimately, certainly the women that I see at the bar on a daily basis are often the ones that are juggling the childcare situation, are juggling the last minute cancelled childcare situation where how do you get back to pick up a child from school or whatever else it may be? How do you manage pregnancy and maternity if you want children? How do you manage infertility? How do you then manage? And there's a growing conversation about later life and hormonal challenges as one goes through perimenopause and then menopause. And those conversations are now starting to take place in a very different landscape to what they were previously. But they are challenges that we face daily, being at the bar, and no doubt are ones that are globally shared, albeit in very different ways and with very different emphases upon them. I think I do think that's a really important point. And unfortunately, a lot of it grounds it back, doesn't it, to the reality of the day job, in short, and dealing with all of those aspects and having those flexibilities and asking for that accommodation. Certainly from my personal experience of having a baby coming back from maternity leave, if you don't ask, you don't get. It's as simple as that. And actually, most courts, I've got to say, have been receptive to that. They have made rooms available for expressing milk or breastfeeding, or made rooms available so that a case can carry on with a small child that's also present, and those sorts of things. But it also applies to some of our clients as well, who are also facing those similar challenges, often with far less resources than we have, frankly, to actually try to manage them separately. So I would say that I think things are luckily changing to some extent, but those challenges are still there. And I do hope that as we move and progress through our careers at the bar, that we are making things better for the women that come behind us, and that these things are there. That it's much easier, that asking for time because you need to express milk, for example, becomes something that isn't something which you shy away from, but it's actually accommodated into the court day. Everyone accepts that that's what's got to be done, or going to a hospital appointment for infertility treatment, or dealing with aspects that arise in relation to your health and menopause, those sorts of issues. And so as I say, it's a learning curve for us all. Societal structural change is needed, but hopefully each one of us can play a small part, and I include each one of us both on this talk today, on this round table, but also everybody in the room is here because they want to make a difference, and we can all do that in our everyday professional lives as well as our personal lives. Just picking up then on challenges more generally, Gráinne, is there anything you want to come in on there?
Well, just to echo everything that you've both said in terms of bringing it slightly closer to home to the bar, because we are also all women human rights defenders as well. And yeah, I really feel strongly about the points that you've made, Jo, and I think there is still a real issue with the retention of women at the bar, particularly when it gets to the 13-14 year plus mark, and a lot of it, but not all of it, has to do with family life, the gender pay gap, the conditions and the ability to work in the way that we are expected to work. And I think all of those issues, there have been improvements, but not enough. We're still seeing a huge number of women leave. We're seeing a huge number of women stay, but face a number of barriers. And in particular, it takes them a really long time to get the promotions that really they could have got much sooner. And I think that's a big issue to do with our systems, but also these conversations just really make a huge difference in shining a light on it, in the hope that the conversations alone can have a really big difference. So yeah, I agree with you on all of those points.
Yeah, I think support systems are really important, and actually they are growing at the UK bar with different organisations, women in criminal law, in different specialist organisations like that, really trying to force change, actually getting chambers to sign up to different policies, whether it's on maternity or menopause, whatever it may be, trying to address that gender pay gap. I know the Bar Council has been doing quite a lot of work, but we are very far away from any resolution of that. I mean, the figures have been pretty stark that have both recently been published. They're appalling. And obviously the issues of intersectionality that then play a role in that as well, with Black women in particular being particularly disadvantaged and massively disproportionately so. And we really do need to hold that mirror up to ourselves and ask ourselves why that is and what we can do about it, for ourselves and each other. I do note that Diana, you've got your hand up. I'm afraid I'm technologically completely unsavvy, and so I'm not sure whether you can be unmuted to ask a question or not, or whether, oh no, maybe it was an accidental hand. But if there is a question or any comment that you want to make, just pop it in the Q&A. I'm afraid I simply don't know how to otherwise allow you to speak, which is awful really when you think this is about women and speaking and promoting people's voices. But do please put it in the Q&A, and we'll come to address that. I'm just actually turning now briefly to a couple of the questions that have popped up. And the first is, how do we consider our own safety when travelling to potentially hostile environments? Have we ever been prevented from acting in a case where our presence may antagonise a situation or put people at risk, or put you individually at risk? Have a little think about that for a moment. I mean, the Bar Human Rights Committee is very much acutely aware actually of personal risks to security when our members or the Executive Committee are travelling. The mere fact of travelling into a country can often bring significant attention upon yourselves. A personal experience is simply actually just the refusal of a visa has happened before. I mean, that's that obviously the risk is not there because you don't then enter the country. But the deliberate delays to processing visas or refuse and effectively then as a consequence being a refused one has prevented certainly me from travelling to Sri Lanka in the past, for example. Once you are known within a country, then there's always the potential risk that you will be flagged upon your entry into that country. I think we're very fortunate more generally that individually we've not faced significant risks, mainly because that risk assessment is quite a robust process, and if those risks are too great, then we simply do not travel. It's for a variety of different reasons, including very practical ones such as an entire lack of insurance, for example, and getting people back out of a country. So those sorts of issues really that arise, and certainly I had that when it came to dealing with trial observations some years ago in Turkey, and being unable to travel to Diyarbakir at the time because it was sort of on the edge of a conflict zone and part of a conflict zone. So there were difficulties with that, and that had to be cancelled, unfortunately. And some of it can be resolved remotely, but there's nothing like being there in person. Don't know if anybody else wants to come in on that point.
Yeah, I could jump in.
Sorry,
go on. Grania, go ahead.
No, just to say, I mean, it is a live issue in lots of the observations or delegations that we attend, and there's obviously quite extensive risk assessments, etc. done. I think we have had difficulties, as Joe has said, with Egypt, with Bahrain, with Sri Lanka. I think possibly also with Israel at different times, and so it's a point which really it can, particularly if we're going to report on a case or a situation, the fact that you're turned away for potentially doing that work is obviously an indicator sometimes of itself as to the transparency of the arrangements. But it is an issue that we always have to grapple with and prepare for in advance. But Haydee, yes.
Right, yeah. So I think, travel certainly is one that you do have to do that robust risk assessment and make sure that it's safe, not only for the travel during the mission or the project, but then also to consider how it might impact any personal travel afterwards, having been involved in cases as well. I think there's a temptation sometimes to put our own safety and security to the side on behalf of our clients, but it's such a critical thing to take care of ourselves as well, and to also think about the fact that if our safety and security might be at risk, is that going to allow us to actually act fully and in the best interest of our clients as well? Just something that's part of the analysis of when you take on a case, and making sure that you can act in the best interest of your client, but then also keep yourself safe as well, because both are so important. And also just making sure to do an assessment on the do no harm principle for your clients as well. So are any steps that you're going to take, or any part of your representation, going to cause reprisals or any other kind of harm to your clients? So I think it's all just, it's a broad analysis that needs to be undertaken, that's important for everyone.
Yeah, I think I'd just echo on that. I mean, I did a trial observation in Cameroon, and that was only possible because we had fantastic support from the people who'd requested us to go, and they picked me up and took me everywhere, so that I felt very safe in doing that. And we checked all the time on whether it was appropriate to be going where we were going. But also, every time I'm in Trinidad, the crime situation there, unfortunately, is so bad at the moment. There's a state of emergency even been declared. But every time I've been since 2004, there has been a crime problem. And as a female white person, I stand out like a sore thumb. And even the last time I was there, we finished court and I was hungry and wanted to go off and find myself some food. So I left the office and walked a couple of blocks with, not even on my own, but with a junior sort of intern in the office. We went round and found a Subway in the capital, and about 5 minutes later the phone started ringing, going, "Where the hell are you?" I've just gone for a sandwich. And this car sort of had to zoom up and collect us and say, it's just not safe for you to be walking around, and this is a country I'm used to being in. So we have to be very careful about our safety, but trust the people we're working with in country also to keep us safe, because the last thing we want to do, as Haydee was saying, is cause more problems. We're supposed to be there to be of assistance rather than need assistance ourselves.
I just jump in one other little thing as well. Just, I think physical security for clients and for yourself is so important, but also cyber security tends to be more and more a problem as well. So making sure to be vigilant with that, you protect yourself, go through all the checks for both yourself and your client as well.
Yeah. I think I was going to pick up on that actually, because we've been discussing, as you say, travel and in-country situations and things like that. But actually, becoming engaged in these types of activities can draw a huge amount of attention to you. And whether that's cyber attacks or other forms of surveillance, none of that is unusual. Hacking and so on and so forth. We see it across the globe at the moment, particularly for journalists. But that also extends to if you're doing certain types of work. I know we've had particular concerns in relation to work that we conducted, for example, in China, the diminishing democracy in Hong Kong, those sorts of issues as well. So there are different concerns depending upon the work that you're undertaking. Unfortunately, it's not always just about the danger that you may face in a country. It's also about the dangers that you may subsequently face, whether that's because you are linked personally to that. And as Haydee's already pointed out, you know, the implications as well for your potential onward travel. Your holiday plans may have to change significantly as a consequence of work you become involved in. I mean, it's a small cost, a small price to pay, and certainly very minor in comparison to some of the issues that we've been discussing and in terms of challenges that women across the world face today, but they are nonetheless all there and present. Just picking up on a couple of other questions in the chat. There's one question asking about becoming very keen to get involved in the area, but other obstacles, such as lack of accessibility. Is there anything you'd recommend students doing? My view on that is there are lots of different ways to get involved. Physical accessibility is not necessarily a barrier at all, actually. And other disabilities or accessibility issues can also be dealt with. We have many women at the bar who have accessibility challenges, and men as well, who are the leaders in their field. I think it's really trying to just work out what it is that you want to do and gaining experience within that precise area, whether that's writing, research, policy work. There are lots of opportunities out there. Jodie, I don't know if there's anything that you want to pick up on there. The reason I say that is because Jodie comes with a huge amount of experience, because she also used to work at Justice, and so this is one of the areas that was on the agenda, which is why
I'm not even meant to be here. Be Isabella
in at the last minute, and we're very grateful for it. Bringing a whole wealth of experience and knowledge.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because you sort of want to leap in as soon as you can, and sometimes it's just about building up as much experience as you can before starting the job. You know, we come from the bar here, but we're all barristers, so we've done that training, and that gives us the expertise to go in and do the things that we're talking about. But we all were students. I mean, Jo and I, our first experiences were with Amicus, I think, weren't they? Going out to Texas for me. Were you Texas as well?
No, I was actually Washington DC randomly.
Oh,
more Supreme Court and Guantanamo Bay based. It was when it was in the aftermath of 9/11.
Oh, I know.
Very much. It was the initial days of Guantanamo Bay and those years, which was a fantastic time to become involved in, but pure chance for obvious reasons in terms of timing.
And we can
gave rise to amazing opportunities.
Yes, but you know, that was a fantastic opportunity. I was in Houston working on final federal appeals, so we had death warrants coming in, which, you know, my first experiences of properly practicing. Well, it's not even properly practicing because I qualified as a barrister, but obviously that's not why I was there. I was still student support, but going to death row and meeting clients there cannot do anything but shape your future career. So I would, but the fundamental difficulty with these things is, you know, when I say go and do internships, it's finding ones that are paid. That's the frustration. I was able to go to Texas and then Trinidad, and I'm now qualified in Trinidad because we had funding at Amicus for a project through the the Foreign Office, as it then was, and then through my to go to Trinidad through their internships fund. So I think looking for funding, but also looking for paid internships. And Justice, we fortunately did do paid I wouldn't have offered them unless they were paid internships for 3 months or 6 months. And I think looking for those is certainly a really great way to obtain experience. I know that they're few and far between, and everyone wants to do them. So it's just sort of being creative around, can you offer assistance to a barrister on a particular project? Do they need research? Any sort of creative way you can find to build up some experience, really, in connection with cases, away from your hypotheticals in your student experience, are all really valuable, because then, you know, that access you're getting to practicing people will help shape the ideas of the practice you want to develop.
Brilliant.
And on that quickly.
Oh, absolutely, please do.
I think one other thing to consider, whether you're a student or a member of the bar or practicing in any other way and wanting to develop more of a human rights practice, is to remember that human rights touch really every part of our lives. So to look at the experiences that you've already had in different areas of law or advocacy, or any experiences that might be available to you, or any opportunities, and to really see the value in them and how they can help to develop your practice. So even if it's something that, say, you know, family law has so much human rights in it that translates and helps contribute to that experience and will make you a better advocate, or criminal law as well, or you know, just anything that you do really is going to give you a knowledge base that's going to be applicable to human rights as well. So get involved in you know, there's not only certain opportunities that are going to help you develop those careers, but you know, all the opportunities that are available, see the value that and the ways that it's going to help you develop that human rights career, and how that draws on aspects of human rights as well.
And then just, I appreciate we're rounding this off now, because it's going to be the end of lunchtime for many who are on lunch breaks. Just really with a few reflections. So obviously this year's theme is accelerating action, and we've spoken a lot about things that have been done and the current context, but perhaps moving to the future and just taking some thoughts from each of you, if I may. Perhaps turning to you first, Grania.
Yeah, my hope for the future is just that there are more women's voices in the mainstream, and that we all continue to work together to accelerate action and try to drive meaningful change in our practice and in our lives, and that we work together while doing so. So more of the same from me.
Jodie?
I think for me, I'd use the words visibility, seeing more women in positions of seniority. You know, even in this country, our judiciary and our senior judiciary is still so male, pale, Lansdale, and that is sad. So the more we can do, it's fantastic that at entry level we're at equity now between women and men. Not so much on colour, which is a shame, but it's increasing steadily. But the more senior you get, the more that dissipates, and it's a matter of confidence, but it's also a matter of there being fewer women on those interview panels. People like to see what they know, they're familiar with what they know, and confident men walking into a room and blagging is something that women are not yet fully up to speed with, and B, seen critical. Confident women are criticised, and these are the things we have to address. You know, confident women should be celebrated rather than seen in a negative light, and we have a lot of work to do at getting ourselves into these senior positions, not only in this country but across the world. And sadly, in As I say, my practice in Trinidad, unfortunately, they are all old white men. So these are the problems we have. As it's a bigger challenge than we can face this particular year, but we have to keep talking about the value of women, our equal value in all that we can do to promote human rights.
Thank you, Jodie. And then Haydee?
Sure. I think what I'd like to see, is continuing to support each other, checking in with each other, reaching out, saying, how are you doing? You know, being someone that can listen, not only with our colleagues who are our contemporaries, but women that are junior to us, women that are senior to us, reaching out across the board, and also women who aren't maybe our colleagues, but are our clients or you know, we're in partnerships with on different projects. So really just checking in and reaching out. But then the other thing, just looking forward as well, I just did want to highlight one BHRC project as well that touches upon the rights of women, and particularly women journalists as well. A project that BHRC is looking at doing with Article 19 to look at freedom of expression, looking at members of the press and members of the media and how they're often under attack, and looking at things like the investigative gaps. When members of the media are attacked, you know, what resources under international law are there to investigate those and make sure that there's accountability as well. So supporting, you know, the free press, the right to free expression, and those kinds of rights as well.
Thank you, Haydee. I think that rounds it all off very nicely. Can I just also just say thank you firstly to each of our panelists, but also thank you for all of you for attending today, taking that time out of your day to come along to what I hope has been an uplifting panel. These panels can sometimes also be very depressing, but I hope that what you can take away from this is that there is hope. That we've been fortunate to hear from both inspirational women, but also, you know, hear about those that really do inspire us, the work that we find inspiring, the reason that we do the jobs that we do, in short. And I hope that everyone can take this year's theme forward and accelerate change in whatever way that may be. It can be in a tiny step tomorrow morning. It can be, as Haydee said, you know, supporting your friends, supporting your colleagues, whether it's in the legal work that you do, the policy sphere, but each time just thinking, what can I do to support other women in the world around me? And together, I'm sure, ultimately, as I say, incremental change will take place. So again, thank you all very, very much. And I'm going to just end the seminar now. Thank you.